Rick and Harm, because they're on Central European time, and so it's getting kind of late there. So we'll start with you all. But before we get started, are there any news to report? Anything anyone wanted to share here in the room, online? Doesn't seem like it. Right, and if you are online and you want us to hear you, please unmute yourself or use the chat function in the Zoom. All right, so, okay, well, if there's no updates, then I'll turn it over to Rick. Rick, tell us about Proofy.
Yeah, thank you very much. I basically came up with Proofy together with Harm to basically change the way we do digital transactions. And basically today we're also launching our product demo. So that's going live this night or tomorrow morning. I leave that up to Sven. I think Sven is also here in this Zoom. He's going to do the demo of the product, and I'm going to take you before we dive into that and explain you why we made Proofy and what the general thought is behind it. So, what is the current problem with, how can I go to the next slide? Yes. Okay, today we use e-signing to formalize anything, but that only works with PDFs. This doesn't fit the digital age we live in and the way we do business today. So if we interact as a business owner, and I am one, then I use other applications than a PDF to formalize some agreement. I use WhatsApp, I use emails, I use Telegram, Slack. Our new generation wants things fast and instantly. And we want something with one click and not to formalize and put something in a PDF, then upload it to the cloud and then put a signature on it and wait for another party to do that as well. So that's why we came up with Proofy. That allows you to verify transaction with just one click with the use of your application you use to do business. Yeah, whether that's Slack, WeTransfer, or a CRM system. Anything will do as long as you interact with it with a counterparty. So which acts do we sign today? Well, basically that is the PDFs, which are signed by either DocuSign or still at a notary on a piece of paper. Acts that we could sign and would like to sign easily, those are emails, payments, invoices, and stuff like that. And in the near future, we will have our cars and our refrigerators signing acts, whether it's the ordering of a carton of milk at Whole Foods or paying for a parking ticket, which is done by your Tesla, right? But before we actually dive into the deeper thoughts of the software of Proofy, let me explain you about the essence of a signature itself. And what the current state is of signature applications that we use today, like DocuSign. For me and for my team, an e-signature application feels like the first car. It's a the first car was a motor-driven carriage that does the trick. It drives, but it still feels weird. It's not optimized for what it should do. The essence of a signature is basically formalization. What are we agreeing upon? With who are we agreeing upon something? And the authority, is that person able to represent a company that he's saying he is? That's what we want to know when we want to formalize a business deal. So how did e-signature providers manage to do this? Well, parties like DocuSign literally translated the old school process of signing an agreement. Normally you sit around the table face to face, you can look each other in the eye and then say, okay, let's do this deal. We're signing that on a piece of paper and the paper goes around and everybody gets a copy. And DocuSign literally translated that by digitizing this procedure, and where everybody, maybe you can randomly change the order, signs it and basically pastes or draws his signature on a digitized piece of paper, a PDF. But yeah, as said, it is not optimized for the way we do business in this digital era. It feels still a bit like that first car. So Proofy, we redesigned it from the ground up, making it compatible with the way we work today and do business today, which is instant and fluently. So with Proofy, you're able to sign anything and verify it with just one click. How do we do that? For the signature, so for the formalization part, we use cryptographic signatures. Well, this has the advantage because the signature is inseparable from the data and can be automatically verified. And with a signature on a piece of paper, you need to, you can only trust that person or having someone to check whether that's correct by checking his passport or something. But with a cryptographic signature, well, that's a unique identifier which is which can be attached to any company or person. The identity we solve by connecting the cryptographic keys to an SSL certificate, right? An SSL certificate can only be of a certain company, and only that company can verify that SSL certificate. So now with Proofy, by connecting that SSL to the cryptographic key, we are able to identify an organization by its signature. Now we have formalization and identity solved, but how do we do the authority? We use the chain of trust for that. So organizations in Proofy are able to make associations between the key pairs of employees and the things they can do within that organization. So for instance, having an employee being able to send out invoices or approve payments, or actually sign and legally bind that organization. So not everybody can legally bind an organization. Normally, let's say with DocuSign, we need to look into the Chamber of Commerce, whether somebody's able to represent it. How does work? We have two ways of a Proofy. We have a one-way Proofy. If you send out, let's say, an email with an invoice, you sign that email with that invoice cryptographically. The receiver, which runs Proofy into his browser, doesn't have to check manually anything of that person or that organization. The plugin verifies automatically the identity, authority, and whether that person was allowed to perform this action, and checks the signature of the company he's dealing with. So in app, it will tell you whether this is good, yes or no. In a two-way, it works exactly the same, only when the counterparty who receives, let's say, the invoice or anything else that he needs to approve, the one who sent that original message is checked whether the party that says okay is able to do so and has the correct identity. So basically, we're closing the loop and being able to sign anything with Proofy. And which use cases can we look at and can we solve with this? The online payments. Securing that, there's a lot of fraud here because payments are becoming more instant, more in-app, and that's what you want to verify and secure. File transfers. Let's say you use WeTransfer, you're able to sign file transfers with that. Sharing intellectual property, you sign the authorization of IoT devices, which I mentioned. Obviously, the approval and signing of legal acts or digital acts, and the email and sender and content verification. So if you're having a mail trail or mail conversation with somebody, Proofy checks whether that sender and that receiving party can be trusted, and whether the content in the email bodies have not been modified. The first beta product of Proofy is based on Gmail. We used email because there's a lot of digital fraud with email, fake invoices, CEO fraud, phishing, fake emails from tax authorities with payment requests. So we basically started with that. And Proofy for Gmail, because Gmail has a really good open interface. And the Chrome browser is used by 85% here in Europe and about 70% in the US. So it makes sense to start with that. And the proofies are currently one way. I'm going to give the presentation rights to Sven. Sven is not able to talk right now. But if you give him the present rights, he will give you the demo.
Great. All right, so you have to unshare your screen.
Yeah.
And now Sven should be able to share his screen.
Okay, Sven.
Yeah, I think I got it.
Perfect, you can see it.
Right. So yeah, I'm just going to demo how the system works. So you first need to create an account. I'm going to create an account. And what it'll do, it'll send you an email to verify that you actually own this email address. So I will receive my email, I will verify it. And once you verified your account, you get the opportunity to install the plugin. So we've created this plugin which will enhance basically your mail application. So I'm going to install the extension, and it's now added to my browser. So now I should be able to log into the Proofy system using the plugin. And this will link my digital sign-in keys to my email client, and every time I should now, when I create an email, it will sign this email using my cryptographic keys. So now I'm logged in. It needs to reload. And now you'll see that it'll add this Proofy button, so I can switch it on. And I'll send an email to another email address myself. So now I send it to myself, or actually another email address of myself, and you'll see that it'll add this extra button. So the plugin will verify if the email is actually signed by the Proofy system. If so, then you can click the link and it will lead you to a system where you can verify whether or not the email was signed. So you can see that it was sent to this person, it was signed by my account. And as you can see, the organization currently isn't verified. And what we're doing is we're leveraging basically, so Rick already mentioned, we're leveraging on the SSL extended validation. So you can add a domain which has this extended validation SSL certificate, and you need to add a DNS record so that you prove that you actually own this domain. I've already done this, so now it's verified. And now if you look at the Proofy, you'll see that the organization is verified. And it will load all the information from the SSL certificate. So it shows the company registration number and where it's actually based. And the last thing that we do is we leverage on blockchain technology to timestamp this Proofy. So the hash that is generated from the email is also stored on the blockchain, so that you're actually 100% sure this email was sent at this point in time. That basically concludes my demonstration.
Great, thank you, Sven. All right. Any questions from you guys here in the group or anyone online?
What blockchain did you build it on?
Do you want to answer this one, Rick?
Oh yeah, we built it on LTO network. This is basically our own blockchain. It runs about 80 or 90 nodes. It's a permissionless chain, so anybody can join. And it does about 25 to 30,000 transactions on a daily basis. And it's optimized for transactions like this, like anchoring transactions.
Very cool.
In terms of data security, are you storing any contents of the message or essentially just issuing a certificate that ensures its validity?
Yeah, so we're not storing any data onto a blockchain. I think that's a really bad idea, especially from a GDPR perspective. That's impossible, especially in Europe. So we're only storing the hash of a document or piece of data. Any digital asset can be hashed, and that hash is stored.
Thank you.
So my question is, I'm curious about the use cases. In a sense, you're saying that even e-signatures, the way they're done now through DocuSign and so on, it's too formal or too complicated. But then again, I wonder, like, in what areas people really want to, bind themselves with a signature, right? Like, if you just exchange an email, I promise my wife that I will empty the dishwasher, and she wants me to sign it, I will say, no, I won't do that. I don't want to do that. Or what kind of contexts do you anticipate people will want the practicality of your solution, but they want sort of the extra formality of wanting to add a signature on it.
The digital signature, as we know, the e-signature as we know it today, will disappear very soon. And why is this going? We're not in Europe. We have GDPR. This is the main problem which DocuSign is going to face, because you're not able to send out personal data anymore. Also, not when it is inside of a contract. So what will happen? And law firms already starting to do this. In M&A deals, we're not sharing the data anymore via email. We're sharing hyperlinks. But how can you be sure that the hyperlink you're sending, that the content behind that hyperlink has not been altered? DocuSign cannot do that. It's impossible for them to do that. So that's why you want to sign the content behind the hyperlink you sign, and that hyperlink you share via email. And that's where you use proofing for. This is a typical use case.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
And just to add, Roland, I think we have been working on the ComK project in the past, and I think it's still future work, but for any transaction that is done for us by a machine or by an algorithm or by AI in the future, we will need the authorization and authentication. And a solution like DocuSign is not developed to be used by technology. It's always a mirror of a human transaction and a human signature on a digital document. And I think the interesting part of what Proofy is doing today is that the use case is not limited to copying the DocuSign use case. It can be used in much more than that. We are using it in my new company just for verification of companies that can send us an invoice. So to make sure that the people that send the invoice are actually proved by us as a allowed vendor that can send an invoice. So I don't think that Proofy is only focusing on the digital signature as we are currently using in the legal industry. It is also a solution for a lot of problems we will face in the future.
So it can be used by electronic agents or like by computers automatically to verify transactions, or is that what you're saying?
So Roland, it's Bruce. I'm interested. This might help with the electronic medical record in the case that a doctor in Sweden needs to write a prescription here or a controlled substance in one or both countries. So you'd like that professional licensing proof to be on an SSL so as to have international credibility.
Exactly. Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think because we chose SSL because it's a universal identification method. With SSL, you're able to sign something, right? So you know that the company that has access to the certificate, they are verified, and they are verified by the big SSL providers. They check who's authorized to that company. They check where that company is based, the Chamber of Commerce number. So it is the easiest way to leverage on identity, and it's a global standard. So indeed, for medical stuff or for medical prescriptions, this might be really suited, because then you can be 100% sure that a pharmacy in Silicon Valley that receive a repeatable subscription from a doctor in Sweden is actually allowed to do so. It's actually a doctor in Sweden and not some fraud. You don't have to check that manually. Proofy does that for you. So I think it's a good use case.
Liam has a question.
I just have a quick question. So in certain situations where there are larger enterprises, where you might have someone who has the authorization to make a signature, but because of IT infrastructure, or they don't have access to a company's email address, or certainly kind of the ability to get that kind of authorization, that they're not under that IT umbrella. Is that a problem where you have like an independent contractor making a...
No. Yeah, okay, for large organization, let's say it's Amazon, right? So Amazon has thousands of different entities and departments and authorization levels. So you're able to make key pairs between, and you can make associations with the key pairs between several organizations. So it doesn't even matter whether that's a subsidiary of AWS, or that's maybe an affiliated organization. Let's say it's the Red Cross that is giving somebody the association to build a new hospital in Mozambique. That's possible. So based on that association, a local contractor can build a school, sending the invoices directly to the Red Cross to be paid. Yeah. So we use the association between key pairs. You need to obviously verify the main domain once. So if that is Amazon.com, the administrator needs to make it one time a DNS record and make the associations on a lower level in the structure. And then those people can drip feed that in the chain of trust to employees of those subsidiaries and affiliated organizations.
Jose has a question in chat. Does Proofy have an open API or similar?
Open API.
Great.
I have a question. You might have discussed it. Are you gonna open it for consumer users, like people who don't own a domain?
Yeah, so that's a difficult part, right? Because how can you verify an identity of a person with only an email address? If you have a Gmail address, you don't work at Google. So the thing is, what we do here, we are talking to a KYC provider who can deliver automated KYC on persons. So if you upload you walk through the online KYC process, you upload your identity card, it will preset your Proofy account. You're not able to change your name, your date of birth and stuff like that you're sending out in correspondence with somebody else. So you're not able to change your name. Let's say you're John Doe. You're not able to change that to Jack Black. So everybody knows that you're dealing with John Doe with johndoe@gmail.com, and that person is actually John Doe.
But in the US, you can change your name anytime you want. So how do you know that the name I have has not been changed?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
In the US, anyone can change their name anytime they want and as many times they want.
Yes, I understand, but in your passport, it reflects your actual name, which it is then.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we leverage on your identity. It doesn't matter. You can change your name 100 times, but it reflects in your passport, right?
Mm-hmm.
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 And okay, so tomorrow is your official launch.
Yeah, we have a closed beta, so everybody who has an extended SSL certificate and has uses G Suite, so Gmail for Business, is able to get Proofy for free and use it.
Neat. And in the future, what do you think how are you gonna make money from Proofy?
We're doing a transaction-based subscription model. So basically, you're paying for the number of transactions you're doing. Let me give you a comparison. Like, okay, if you want to use DocuSign API, you pay about $8 for a signature. With Proofy, that's more like 1 or 2 cents, depending on the number of transactions you do. So you're able to sign much more than you do with DocuSign.
Okay, cool. All right, are there any other questions for Rick or Harm or Sven?
Super interesting.
So Rick, you may want to put your email address or however you'd like people to get back to you in the chat so
Yeah,
people can be in touch.
Yeah, thank you so
That'd
much.
be
We're
awesome.
excited that we got a little preview before the actual launch date. So thank you so much. And this is very cool, very interesting, and really appreciate you joining us.
All right, really
thank
cool.
you so much.
Thank you very much for the attention.
All right, thanks. All right, so next up is Aaron.
Okay, can you all hear and see me? Here, let's start my video.
We can see you, yes. There you are.
Okay,
Hi, welcome.
Great. Hi, thank you so much for having me here. I'm glad that it finally worked out. I wanted to start by saying I'm a little bit starstruck. I've been following Codex for years. The Codex list of legal tech startups was really a huge help for me when I was starting or just thinking about legal tech and what it all meant. So it feels very exciting anyway for me to be presenting. I wish I could be there in person.
Thank you.
I'm as it is, I'm in an Airbnb in Montreal right now, so this is also a pretty good place to be. So I'm going to present SiteRight to you. Let me just, I'll explain a bit of background behind, how it came to be, and then I'll walk you through exactly what it does. So a bit of background about me. I'm a lawyer. I'm based normally in Toronto. I'm trained at McGill Law School, and this is by way of background or by way of how sort of SiteRight came to be. When I started out in law school, I'd come out of graduate school. I started at law school, and on my very first day in law school, they had the introduction to our legal research and writing class, and they introduced to us this concept of a legal citation. And they had the editorial team of the McGill Law Journal come in and show us how it matters whether there's curved brackets or square brackets, and don't get them wrong because you're gonna, you'll lose grades. And coming out of grad school where I'd use tools like EndNote, I thought, okay, well, this is a waste of an hour. I'll just use whatever version of EndNote works in law school, except that tool doesn't exist. So over the course of my time in law school, I got pretty intimately familiar with how legal citations work. I found myself on the Law Journal. I also was one of the associate editors of the McGill Guide, which is the Canadian equivalent of the Blue Book. It's the standard spec for legal citation in Canada. And so I got pretty deep into it. By the time I graduated from law school, I knew the difference between a curved bracket and a square bracket. But when I started in practice, and I thought, wouldn't it be nice over the course of law school? Wouldn't it be nice if we had an automatic citation tool, somewhat like EndNote, but for citation, but for legal citation. And so when I got into practice, I kind of discovered the problems. Citation was sort of a small piece of a larger problem. one problem I noticed immediately while I was, starting out in a litigation practice at a large law firm is that there's a whole lot of very specific formatting and document assembly requirements that go into preparing a document for court. Once your brief has finally been drafted, you have to, at least in Ontario or in Canada, compile all the citations, all the sources that you cited, and physically print them out. And at least while I was there, this was not that long ago, this was a couple of years ago, you have to draw a physical black bar next to each paragraph. And that's so that the judge and the opposing counsel can look at your case, see how you cited Dunsmuir at paragraph 23, and then they'd flip into this book of authorities and actually see paragraph 23 to cross-reference what you said the law says with what the law actually says. So people, junior people like me, were taking out their markers, or if they were super sophisticated and really on the leading edge of tech, you could use Adobe to draw a black line digitally onto your PDFs. So that's called a book of authorities. It was a miserable process. I did not enjoy it one bit. And so, okay, citations, books of authorities. The other problem I realized while I was there at this firm was really a knowledge problem. And that's to say, it was one thing for me to have to spend a lot of time at the end of the process doing formatting. But what I really wanted to do was at the beginning of a research process, when a new matter came across my desk, was to very quickly jump to the work that somebody else had invariably done on the same topic as me, and be able to copy and paste 80% of that and put it into my own document. And so what I found was that large law firms like mine have sophisticated document management systems, and they make it possible sometimes to search for stuff. But what you find after a search is a final work product, and that work product is just the tip of a very deep iceberg. And so what I mean by that is someone will have written a draft of a memo or a brief, and they'll have done a whole lot of legal research that will go into that brief, and that will all be lost when the time comes when I actually find that final work product, because I can see the words that lawyer wrote, but what I can't do is see the context behind what they wrote. I can't see the cases that they cited because those didn't get saved anywhere. And so what I have to do is reconstruct somebody else's research process in order for me to leverage the work that they did to adapt it for my own new scenario. So there are two problems that SiteRight's trying to solve. One of them is a small, irritating workflow problem that does take hours and hours out of lawyers' practices, and it's tasks that clients tend not to pay for. So that's the post-production process of preparing your citations and preparing, at least in Canada, that thing called a book of authorities. There's another problem, though, which is the knowledge problem, and that fits sort of in the, if you will, in the pre-production phase. When the time comes for me to think about researching what somebody else has done, or when the time comes for me to do legal research, the task is first, how do I leverage the work other people have done? And then throughout that, in the middle of the process, there's a collaboration problem. And so what I'll be working on, as a junior, I would be working on a draft of a memo or a brief, and I would be circulating that to a number of other people in the firm who had some part to play in that. And so we're constantly flipping PDFs back and forth of whatever the latest draft of that document is. Again, even if we have a sophisticated document management system, there's still a lot of back and forth over those PDFs and those cases. And so what we're really trying to solve here is a workflow problem, but what's at its base is a knowledge problem. And so what I want to do is show you how SiteRight works in this target of those problems. I'm going to jump right into it right now and see, let's see here if it will actually work. I'm going to try to share my screen. Tell me if you can all see my screen.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Okay. So I'm going to walk you through how SiteRight works. At a high level, what SiteRight allows lawyers to do is download content from online legal research providers, centrally store that content in a way that makes it accessible to others, work with that content directly within your work process, and then reuse it later on. So here's how it works. My research process starts by typing in keywords generally, or trying to find, so researching issues. So here I'm on CANLI, which is the Canadian Free Online Legal Research Database. I've done a very, very brief search on vicarious liability involving contracts. I found one case that I thought was going to be relevant here. So here it's a numbered case, Alberta versus Fairwaves Coffee. So at this point in my process, I found a case that I think is going to be useful to me, but I'm not sure. Right? Maybe, I may, in the course of my research, find 25 or 30 cases that I think I want to save for later. only one or two of them might actually make it in as directly on point. And without a tool like SiteWrite, what I would do is I would save this case to my hard drive, and I would probably lose it. And if I didn't lose it, if maybe let's say I had a really good file system internally, I would save it into my folders. Maybe my firm would say it's okay to save cases onto my shared hard drive. That often doesn't happen because it ends up spamming the document management system. So what will happen is I'll save a case to my local folders. And even if I have a really good foldering system, there's no guarantee that my colleagues understand my foldering system or are going to be able to find that case for later. So rather than saving a case, finding it, and then immediately losing it, we've built out a browser plugin, which you see up here. So this browser plugin is built into Microsoft Word. Every time you see a case you think is going to be relevant, you click this button. And what it does is it downloads the full text of this case and saves it into a shared library that everybody in my firm has access to. Now, so far, this is pretty similar to what West and Lexis both have foldering systems, so it's kind of similar to that. The difference, though, is where those shared cases live. And so the majority of SiteWrite's interaction, at least in this version of the product that we've already written, happens inside Microsoft Word. And so what you can see up here is SiteWrite appears as another tab on the ribbon. Most of the action, though, is in this side panel right here. And so the side panel shows a list of every case that anybody in my law firm has ever downloaded. And we do this in a way that whenever somebody clicks on a case, we do duplication checking on the front end. And so there are cases that, in Canada, there's one administrative law case that everybody cites called Dunsmuir. And because of deduplication, we don't end up with a million copies of Dunsmuir. You end up with one canonical version that nobody has to go back online and search a second time. So I looked at that case called Alberta. Here it is right here. And so what this allows me to do, what SiteWrite allows me to do is now view the full text of that case directly inside Microsoft Word, directly as I'm working. And so what that means is you can do your research without having to flip back and forth between tabs. All this stuff lives directly inside your document or directly inside Microsoft Word. Now you can interact with this case. So you can see here, let me just zoom in on the Microsoft, on the documents. Oops, that's too close. Let's do it here. So I can pinpoint this case. So I can see here, I think, paragraph 8 looks interesting. I think I want to cite that. Or paragraph 9. I click on paragraph 9. I get a preview of what it's going to appear as, and I can click on cite. And what it's done here is it's created a reference here directly inside the footnotes. And I don't know if you guys can see, but it says directly at paragraph 9. So I can click to pinpoint right away, and it inserts a well-formed citation directly inside my document. Now, because this was created by people who worked for law journals, we've built out all the law journal rules. So what that means here is I'm going to go back here. I'm going to cite this here. I'll go back to Alberta. I'm going to cite it another time. I can also just put in the pinpoints here if I want. You know what? In fact, instead of doing this, what I'll show you here is how I can add some full text. I'm going to highlight some text over here. And you can see here it says block quote. So I'm just going to add a block quote right here. It copies and pastes that text directly into the document, creates a reference for me. But you notice that it says here IBID at paragraph 10. So we've turned at this point, the McGill guide into an algorithm. We've turned legal citation into an algorithm. You'll never ever have to worry about back referencing ever again. So for people who are in the end process of legal research, it's pretty cool. You don't have to think about thumbing your way through the McGill guide or figuring out whether it's curved brackets or square brackets. All these things, by the way, update themselves automatically. So if I were to shift the paragraph with the footnotes around, it will automatically adjust itself. So if I were to move this number 2 and move it above, instead of being IBID, it would show up again as the full note version of the case. What matters though here is, so I've shown you right so far how you can download the full text of a case, view that case directly inside your Word document. I've also showed you how you can cite those cases. Now, when it comes to collaboration and reuse, one key thing here is that every single one of these citations down here is a live object. And so what that means is I can click on RV Jordan down here. You see it says to paragraph 3, and it jumps me right to paragraph 3. And so what I've done is taken a reference manager tool and turned it now into a knowledge platform. What this means is I can circulate this Microsoft Word document that you see around the office, and even the most tech-phobic lawyer can click on RV Jordan and see the full text right there. It also means that the problem I talked about earlier, that problem of losing context when I want to reuse somebody else's document, we've solved that problem as well. Because when I save a final work product, I'm also saving the research at the same time. So we've bound legal research and writing and put them both in the same place. And so we've downloaded the full text. We've now turned it into active objects that are down here. Now, this is going to be a little, I think, slightly less relevant for this audience. I don't know if in California you have a requirement to prepare books of authorities like you do in Canada, but I'll show you how it works anyway. I have this button called Generate BOA. It gives me a choice of how these things are going to appear. I can click on Generate. And we take the full text of those cases. We downloaded the HTML. You, the lawyer, have told us what paragraphs you've used. And we can combine that together into, oh, here we go. And where did my Word doc, it'll open up in a second, good. So here's my book of authorities. So what I showed you just now is about 6 hours worth of labor that we automated. So let's go down to, where was Alberta? Here's the Alberta case right here. And here are what those sidebars would look like. So the job that we've eliminated is that person with the black marker, whose job it is to mark the paragraphs left and right. So what's going on here then is we are looking at how we can use legal citations as a way to build a knowledge platform. Now, in the background, what SiteRight is doing is we're within the organization that uses SiteRight. So for a given law firm, we take note of the user of our platform. So which lawyer or which person in the law firm is using the tool, which cases they're citing, which documents they're writing, which Microsoft Word documents they're writing, and which clients they're writing those documents for. When you start up SiteRight for the first time, it asks you to put in a client matter number in the same way that West or Lexis asks you to do that. So we store and save in a database the people, the documents, the cases, and the clients. And that provides us enough information to generate a whole bunch of really useful insights. For example, one thing I can do, remember, by the way, the problem I'm trying to solve as a lawyer is how somebody in my firm has done something like this matter before. How do I find it and reuse it most effectively? And so with SiteRight, the tool that we're building out next will allow you to open up a case. And so again, going back to this example of Dunsmuir, Dunsmuir lays out this test for judicial review of administrative decisions. The test talks about reasonableness and correctness. And I, for the life of me, could never remember what was the difference between the two or how to summarize the test. And I did it a lot. And so what we're able to do now is allow you to open up Dunsmuir. You'll see a heat map of all the paragraphs that people in your firm have used. You'll be able to click on a paragraph and see all the other documents just in your law firm where people have cited just that one paragraph. I could also provide you recommendations and say, look, I see you're using this network of cases here, this book of cases. Here are other people in your firm you should talk to who've worked on similar cases before. So we're targeting a knowledge management aspect or a knowledge management problem. At the same time, we're trying to solve a workflow problem. And our insight here has always been, and I'll stop sharing at this point. How do I stop sharing? Our insight has been, we can sidestep a lot of really complicated machine learning problems of trying to extract signal from noise in large data sets by just allowing lawyers to tell us what's important. So as lawyers use our tool, we are able to extract structured data out of unstructured content and then very quickly turn that into insights that feed a reusable work product for lawyers in the process. And so we built it around this book of authorities use case. Because I speak as a lawyer, I know a lot of lawyers. It's very hard to get lawyers excited about knowledge graphs and reusable knowledge. It is easy to get lawyers excited about solving problems they really don't like to do, like books of authorities. And so understanding that the fundamental problem that faces law going forward is that in an environment where clients are pushing back on legal fees, in an environment where lawyers are increasingly being disaggregated, the work that will continue to go to lawyers will be higher value, but at a much greater efficiency push. And so our job is to help the lawyers that are going to remain in the future work faster and more effectively with the content they already have. So that's what SiteRight is. We've launched in Canada. The first product I showed you where you can cite the stuff, that's called SiteRight Core. That's available right now. We're working right now on building out the next version of the product, which is going to be called SiteRight KM for knowledge management. That's going to include things like a reader view, the heat map, the way of linking all your stuff together. And somewhere down the road, we'll also be clustering these things. We'll be doing things like creating document clusters, so you'll be able to see how it all fits together. All this though has to get driven by what customers actually want. So at every stage in the process, we're constantly talking to people, to either to lawyers, to knowledge managers, to managing partners, figuring out what matters to them so we can build the tools that work for them. So that's SiteRight. I'll pause here and see if you have any questions.
Cool, very cool. Any questions?
Can you talk a bit about the lawyer's acquisition, the client acquisition process? So which strategies do you use to convince lawyers to use your tool?
So it helps to bring in a physical book of authorities. So I wish I had an example for you, but imagine a bound volume like this big, and then you drop it on the table and it makes a really satisfying thump. And then I say, and then you open up the demo and say, this is work that would take you hours to do by hand. And we can do this in seconds. The way that we've gotten into the law firm is by trying to target a very, very specific workflow problem that lawyers understand. And then in the process, expand out of that. So within the law firms that we've spoken to, and our customers tend to be larger law firms. I should say that we've launched now in 6 of Canada's largest law firms, and those firms have been our core customers for now. So our larger law firm tends to have more than 40 people, which is large enough for institutional knowledge to be harder to access. Once you get beyond the ability to walk down the hall and ask somebody, it's very hard to reuse content. Those law firms will tend to employ dedicated people called knowledge managers, who are the equivalent to librarians, where a librarian will help you find external content. The role of a knowledge manager is to help surface internal content within the firm. So they're already dedicating resources dedicating budget to human resources to find this stuff. And so it's easy to get them on board as well. So we try to get on junior lawyers who understand the problem, who may not have a budget to solve it. Knowledge managers whose jobs tend to be, trying to wrap their heads around the knowledge problem in law, and often are charged with just looking at new technology. That's generally what their job tends to be. And then we also try to get a managing partner or somebody with economic decision-making power in the room as well. And the reason why is, the way that the legal practice works is it's hierarchical, and so jobs that suck, you tend to graduate away from those jobs. And the further away you are in your career, the easier it is to forget that you have to do them or that it's a problem. And so we need to sidestep that by making sure that you've got juniors and seniors in a room together, so that the people who are in charge of buying the product can see the faces of the people who will actually be using it.
Thanks.
So I had a question for you, Aaron. It's pretty impressive what you've done. How would you incorporate the scorecard of whether arguing a particular case succeeded in a particular fact pattern? In other words, we tend to, as lawyers, produce an incredible amount of writing, but not a good tracking of whether the result was satisfying to the goals of the lawyer or the client.
So there's a couple answers to that. The simplest answer is we don't. We've made no effort to do that. One reason is that it's a very difficult question to answer, is how this case did. You see the same problem in judicial analytics, where it's very hard, except in very, very narrowly determined cases, it's very difficult to determine whether a case is a win or a loss, because a win means different things for different people in different contexts. And so, even though somebody might have won on the facts, they might have, or maybe someone might have lost on the facts, they might have ended up with much less liability than they would have expected. And so from that perspective, it's a win. And so we don't really want to have to do that process of sort of intuiting whether a case won or lost. At least in the Canadian context, what we're able to do is say, show me all the documents for which a book of authorities was generated. And that at least tells you, because the book of authorities comes in the final is the final thing that you submit to the court, it's a pretty good indicator that the document you're looking at actually went to court, as opposed to a draft or a work in progress or a thing that actually never made it anywhere. And so those are sort of contextual clues that we can use. But the larger answer is, what we try to do is provide insights on who worked on what and make it easy for you to talk to them, because that's generally going to be the best way to find out if I can surface who worked on the document, when they worked on it, are they still in the firm, and here's their phone number, or here's where their office is, that's going to be way more effective. You know, make it easy for me to find the resources I need. Is really what we're going for here.
So we've got a few questions online,
Sure.
one of which I share, so I'll.
Then
Sure.
Mike and Ruben here. So what, you go to the ones online, and Mike and Ruben.
Yep. Do you plan to launch in the U.S. with a version key to the Harvard Blue Book? So that was also my question. And my question is larger, like other style guides, research. So this could be great in academia for literature reviews and all kinds of things. But let's start with Elizabeth Edwards' question here on the Blue Book.
Yes, so the Blue Book is next on our list. So we're still working on Canada right now. We have more of the product that we want to launch in Canada, but the Blue Book has been on our radar from the very beginning. One of the things that we've done is put together what is more or less a universal citation algorithm. We're not the first people to come up with this. Some of you might be familiar with JurisM, Multilingual, Zotero, CSL. Those are all tools. We ended up going a different development routes, but the result is the same, where to actually implement the Blue Book or Oscola or any of the others is not in itself all that complicated. The challenge is finding the customers who want it and making sure that we're in a place to actually devote the resources to doing it. So the plan has always been to go to the US. This is a tool that I know people in the US would love to have. From a library perspective, I would love to create a scenario where, you know, the Stanford Law Library can host its own instance of SiteRight, and that when professors distribute their syllabi, all the cases are just there right away. So you can, you know, work that way. As a side note, when I was in law school, I worked at the Berkman Center on the H2O project. And so I don't know how many of you are familiar with H2O, with like the idea of remixable course packs. But this is sort of, you know, in the same vein as that project as well. So yes, for library purposes, I mean, I think this is amazing, and libraries are near and dear to my heart. And yes, to the Blue Book. I wish I could give you a timeline on it. I'd like it to be as soon as possible, but you know, software development always takes longer than I think it's going to.
Okay. Ruben?
So there's a lot of really interesting things about this. I've taken a few notes. There's really interesting stuff around the authority layers piece, which I think is undervisible. And there's also some value in schema reconciliation for compliance with jurisdiction-specific finished product standards, which I think is particularly around medium-sized firms who are dealing with edge cases outside of their sort of their wheelhouse. There's a lot of work that goes into that, which this clears up. I am reminded immediately of what Medium did with blogging and the layers that they created for consumers, in a traditional sense, to sort of highlight areas and to have a degree of dialogue around that, and to use that as a growth generation strategy. My background's in the growth area. And I wonder whether or not, in addition to sort of serving medium, large firms and sort of tackling that, I think most of us would agree, fairly intense sales cycle comparatively, whether or not there's a product marketing approach where you release, the more contentious, the better, articles or objects in court, where there is going to be some debate around it, and then add a layer to allow basically a public account of sorts where people can comment on that and then have that back and forth and have the conversation be on your platform, because the authority has levels of value. There's levels of value in the authority of the individual who's making a comment or doing something, but there's another level of value where the authority of the specific law firm, and keeping that authority private and the annotation private and all of the value of the knowledge of the firm in-house, there's probably not going to be a lot of value if that's everywhere, right? If it's truly open source. So if the value of this authority and expertise is attributed to the ownership of a private account for the firm, that's fine. But it doesn't prevent you from creating a more open environment which gets sort of higher top line of the funnel, gets a lot of eyeballs on your product for free. And particularly if you can encourage discussion with authority layer against authority layer, so to speak, that sort of helps the, if nothing else, the SEO, and in an ideal world, eliminates this heavy sales cycle by replacing it with something that scales across multiple jurisdictions.
Right. So there's a lot of ideas there that I love. I mean, one of the things you mentioned was, I think I heard you mention just the Medium, like the web platform Medium. And so one of the things I loved from that is the idea that it show you like the most highlighted articles, the most clapped articles. And I'm happy to say that that's an idea that we'd love to see. We're porting that idea directly over to a particular case. You know, same presentation, same view. The next thing that we're building right now is a dedicated reader view where you'll be able to do things like interact with cases, interact with content, highlight it, and then prepare it so that when the time comes to write it, your case is already highlighted and noted with all your comments in it, so you can bring it into your document. In terms of the product marketing approach, one challenge that we do face is publicly hosting case law. We don't really have, we have to work with our own customers' existing licensing rights to content. And so, one of the ways that we operate is very similar to the way Evernote works, right? Evernote is a clipper, lets you save content. Evernote doesn't ask whether or not you're entitled to that content. It assumes that you are, but you promise when you sign up for them that you're not going to upload or content to their platform that you don't have the rights to. But the other thing you promise on those platforms, which is the same for us, is you promise not to redistribute that content that you don't have the right to. And so the risk in opening up a platform from one law firm privately to make it publicly available means you end up with, content sharing restrictions that we probably do. The other thing that we've seen, this is an interesting idea that you had, which is having some sort of public forum. I think, tell me if I misheard you, but what I heard you say was that it would be cool to have like a public forum where, anybody could comment on a particular case, or you could see what people had done on that. I've seen that tried and failed a number of times. I don't know why they haven't always worked out. And certainly in Canada, Canly, which is the free platform, has tried doing that before. I've seen other people try to do it too. Part of the problem is incentives, and getting people to spend the time on the platform and trying to create a social platform where people really feel like they want to contribute or highlight or comment on case law. So I'm certainly open to ideas on how to get people to do that. And certainly as a product marketing idea, I love that because it's great to show people what the platform can do. But I would be interested to see how you can create an environment where people actually do want to comment on case law and have things that are interesting enough to say that other people want to read what they have to say.
Yeah, I think, that's certainly what Casetext has done, and it's, I think it's been, their killer app was something different, let me put it that way, which is Clara.
Right.
Any Michael?
Just real quick, what's your revenue model? How do you?
We are SaaS. It's an all-you-can-eat per user per month. So it was very important to us that we didn't want lawyers to think twice about pushing the Book of Authorities button or about citing things. And so we actually we charge a flat rate, or we charge a simple subscription per user per month. We also have started providing our customers on the larger end with disbursement reports. So we do track each activity. So we know how often you've clicked the BOA, the Book of Authorities button, for example. And so what that allows us to do is to give the customer a report at the end of the month to say, the Book of Authorities button was pressed this many times in relation to this client. And you can then choose how much you want to bill your client for that task. And so we basically have a usage-based billing system that we don't bill for. We translate it over directly to the client, and the client can then decide if they want to pass that cost on. But it does allow them in certain instances to pretty dramatically offset the cost of the product.
Cool. Well, we're pretty much at the end of our time. This is very cool.
Aaron, do you want to put your email in chat so people can reach you because there were a few more questions, so I'll leave that up for a few more seconds after the meeting.
Okay. Sounds good.
Well, thank you so much for your questions.
Very impressive. We're glad that you joined us. Thank you so much. And good luck.
I really appreciate it. And I'll just say, if there's anybody else you think would be interested or you think should hear about it, please send them my way. I'll put my email in the chat. But I love to hear from people, and we are rapidly expanding. So the more people, the better. So if you think it's great, even if you think if you think you want to get in the States, this is also great for me to hear. So please let me know.
Cool.
All right, Aaron. Thanks a lot. Thank you so much. All right, and we'll be meeting again next week. Do we have something?
We are meeting next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. See you next week then.
All right. Thanks so much.